Welcome back to Real Life Documentary, a channel that's dedicated to telling you real-life tragic stories. Please support us by subscribing to our channel and liking our videos. Now to today's episode. In Houston, Texas, a newlywed couple's life took a devastating turn when the husband uncovered a shocking secret that led to one of the city's most horrific crimes. This isn't just a tale of hidden truths or shattered trust. It's a story of a marriage that descended into sheer terror, even rattling seasoned detectives. The secret was lethal, and when revealed, it ripped lives apart in a vicious way. On the surface, Marcus Johnson and Ebony Davis seemed like the perfect couple. Their love story mirrored that of a romance novel, envied by friends and admired by onlookers. Both were African Americans from Houston, where they first crossed paths at a local church event. Marcus, a 32-year-old construction worker, was tall and muscular, with a rugged appeal. Raised in a conservative household, he was deeply rooted in his values, family, and community. Known for his hardworking nature and loyalty, Marcus was the kind of man who put others before himself, always protective and holding traditional beliefs, especially regarding marriage. Ebony, on the other hand, was a striking beauty at 28, known for turning heads wherever she went. Tall with a radiant brown complexion, captivating dark eyes, and an infectious smile, she was a hairstylist making a name for herself in the local beauty industry. Her confidence and charm attracted admiration, but it was her warmth and charisma that truly drew people in. She had a special way of making everyone feel important, and it didn't take long for Marcus to be captivated by her. Their relationship moved quickly but with intense passion. Friends and family were surprised at how fast things progressed between them. Within months of their first meeting, Marcus was proudly introducing Ebony at family gatherings, showcasing her as the one. She seamlessly fit into his life, quickly winning the hearts of his mother, siblings, and close friends. Marcus had fallen deeply in love, so much so that within a year he proposed. Ebony, with tears of joy, accepted without hesitation. To the outside world, they appeared to be living a perfect love story. However, beneath the surface, there were small cracks, signs of trouble that Marcus couldn't yet see but would eventually become impossible to ignore. Their wedding day was a dream come true, held at the historic Houston Baptist Church with over 200 guests in attendance. The ceremony seemed flawless. Marcus stood at the altar, heart racing, as he watched Ebony walk down the aisle in a shimmering white gown, looking like a goddess. He felt incredibly fortunate to have found such a beautiful, loving woman. But even on that day, subtle signs of unease lingered. At times, Ebony seemed distant, her gaze wandering, lost in thought. When they exchanged vows, Marcus noticed her hands trembling slightly, but he dismissed it as wedding day nerves. Still, there was an underlying feeling that something wasn't quite right, though he chose to overlook it in the excitement of the moment. Their honeymoon was equally extravagant, with Marcus sparing no expense as he whisked Ebony away to the Caribbean for 2 weeks of sun, sand, and romance. Yet, despite the beauty of their surroundings, Marcus sensed something was holding Ebony back. At times, she would withdraw, becoming quiet, her eyes taking on a distant look, as though she was grappling with something deep inside. When Marcus asked her what was troubling her, she would quickly brush it off, blaming stress or homesickness. "Don't worry about me, baby," she'd say, wrapping her arms around him and flashing the kind of smile that melted his heart. But Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that Ebony was hiding something from him. After the honeymoon, they settled into their new life as a married couple. They moved into a cozy home in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Houston, a place that offered them the privacy they desired. On weekends, Marcus worked around the house, tending to the yard, while Ebony focused on expanding her beauty business. It was the life Marcus had always dreamed of: a loving wife, a comfortable home, and a promising future. However, as the weeks turned into months, the tension in their relationship grew. Marcus began to notice subtle changes in Ebony's behavior. She became more secretive, locking her phone when he was around and disappearing for hours without any explanation. She started working late more often, claiming to have more clients, but when Marcus tried to surprise her at the salon, he often found it empty. Her excuses became frequent: meetings with friends Marcus had never heard of, phone calls taken in hushed tones. Marcus's suspicions grew, but he didn't want to face the possibility that something was wrong. He loved Ebony deeply, and the thought of her hiding something from him felt like a knife twisting in his gut. Marcus tried to convince himself that he was overthinking things, believing the tension was just the normal stress of married life. After all, no relationship is perfect. But the distance between them only grew. Intimacy became rare, and when it did happen, it felt forced. Ebony would avoid eye contact, often turning away afterward, as if holding back something she couldn't bring herself to say. Then came the night everything unraveled. Although Marcus had always respected Ebony's privacy, his mounting doubts pushed him to do something he never imagined. He decided to search through her things. While Ebony was out with friends, Marcus rifled through her belongings, looking for anything to explain the growing distance. That's when he found it. A small box hidden in the back of the closet, tucked under old clothes. Inside, Marcus uncovered documents that made his heart race. Among the papers was a birth certificate with a name he didn't recognize, Elijah Davis. Confused, he searched further and found medical records, some dating back years. These documents revealed something Marcus had never known. Ebony had transitioned from male to female. In that moment, Marcus's world collapsed. He felt as if the ground had been pulled from beneath him. His hands trembled as he processed the revelation. The woman he had married, the woman he had pledged to love and cherish, had kept this part of her life hidden from him. For Marcus, it wasn't just a secret. It was a betrayal. Everything he thought their relationship was built on now felt like a lie. His mind raced with a mix of emotions: anger, confusion, and heartbreak. How could she have kept something so crucial from him? The person he thought he knew now felt like a stranger. This discovery was just the beginning. Marcus had no idea that his feelings of betrayal and fury were about to spiral into something far darker. Something violent and deadly. Marcus sat in stunned silence for hours, staring at the documents spread across the bed. His mind spun with questions that had no answers. How long had Ebony been hiding this? How could she deceive him about something so fundamental? The quiet ticking of the clock seemed to amplify his growing rage. When Ebony finally returned home that night, she was met with the sight of Marcus sitting on the edge of their bed, the truth of her past laid out in front of him. Her face turned pale the moment she saw the documents. She froze in the doorway, gripping the doorknob as if she might run. "You lied to me," Marcus whispered, his voice trembling with fury. He stood slowly, holding the papers like evidence of a crime. "Who are you? No, what are you?" Ebony's heart sank. She had always feared this day would come. The day her past would catch up with her. She had hoped to tell Marcus in her own time, on her own terms, but fear of losing him had kept her silent for too long. Now it was too late. "Marcus, please, I was going to tell you, I swear I was. I just didn't know how," Ebony pleaded, cautiously stepping toward him, her eyes filling with tears. "I love you. This doesn't change who I am, who we are." But her words only intensified Marcus's anger. "Doesn't change who you are?" he shouted, his voice rising. "You've been lying to me this whole time, Ebony." His voice grew louder, more frantic as his mind struggled to comprehend the shock. "You tricked me into marrying you. Do you know what you've done? I gave you everything, my love, my loyalty, my life, and all along you've been lying to me about the most basic thing. Who you really are." Tears streamed down Ebony's face, but she stood her ground, desperate for him to understand. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want to lose you, Marcus. You mean everything to me. I thought if you knew, you wouldn't love me anymore." Marcus's face twisted in fury. "You thought right," he spat, his words dripping with venom. His anger spiraled out of control, fueled by betrayal, disgust, and confusion. The room seemed to close in around him, and the woman he had once loved now felt like a stranger. The argument escalated, growing more volatile with each passing second. Marcus's rage was like a live wire, unpredictable and dangerous, while Ebony was torn between trying to explain herself and fearing what he might do next. She had never seen him like this, so unhinged, so full of hate. As Marcus yelled, pacing back and forth across the room, Ebony's heart pounded in her chest. She could see the rage building inside him, and it terrified her. "Marcus, please just calm down. We can talk about this. I'll answer any questions you have. Just please don't do anything rash." But Marcus wasn't listening anymore. In his mind, everything they had built together had been a lie, and he couldn't think straight. All he saw was red. His hands clenched into fists, his breathing quickened. "Calm down," he barked. "You've been lying to me for years, and you want me to just calm down?" In a blind fit of rage, Marcus stormed into the garage, his eyes locking onto a hammer. Without hesitation, he grabbed it and returned to the house with chilling determination. Ebony stood frozen in the bedroom, her eyes wide with fear. Marcus approached her with the hammer in hand. Without warning, he swung it down with brutal force. Ebony screamed, trying to shield herself, but Marcus was relentless. Blow after blow, he struck her in a terrifying fury, her cries for mercy drowned out by his uncontrollable rage. The walls of their home were soon splattered with blood as Marcus continued his deadly assault, driven by the overwhelming emotions that consumed him. The savage assault was so brutal that detectives later described it as one of the bloodiest crime scenes they had ever encountered. But Marcus didn't stop there. In a state of madness, he dragged Ebony's lifeless body into the bathroom, his mind completely consumed by rage. He retrieved a knife from the kitchen and, with all sense of humanity gone, began mutilating her body. He slashed and cut her beyond recognition, disfiguring her in a gruesome, senseless attack. By the time the authorities arrived, Ebony's body was barely identifiable. Her face and body had been marred by Marcus's unhinged brutality. When police finally broke through the door, they were confronted with a nightmarish scene. Blood soaked the walls and floors, and in the middle of the chaos sat Marcus, covered in blood, staring blankly at the horror he had created. His expression was a haunting mix of disbelief and madness, as if he couldn't fully comprehend the destruction he had wrought. In a daze, Marcus picked up his phone and shakily dialed 911. I killed her," he whispered when the operator answered, his voice hollow, devoid of emotion. The operator tried to keep him on the line, asking for details, but Marcus could barely form a coherent thought. The weight of his actions had begun to settle in. His life as he knew it was over. When the police arrived, they found Marcus sitting on the floor beside Ebony's mutilated body, his face stained with tears and his hands covered in blood. The once proud, hard-working husband was now a broken shell, consumed by the horror of what he had done. The news of Ebony's death sent shockwaves through their Houston community, and as the media picked up the story, the gruesome details of her murder and the secret she had kept were exposed, sparking nationwide debate. Some painted Marcus as a man betrayed, grappling with an unimaginable revelation, while others condemned his actions as monstrous and inexcusable. Regardless of the opinions, nothing could bring Ebony back. What had started as a secret born from fear had ended in a violent, grisly murder. As police pulled Marcus from the blood-soaked floor of their suburban home, the full weight of the tragedy became clear. Neighbors gathered outside, horrified whispers floating in the humid Houston air. Blue and red lights illuminated the scene, casting an eerie glow over the shattered lives within. Marcus, still covered in Ebony's blood, seemed detached from reality, his vacant eyes staring ahead as though he couldn't fully grasp the nightmare he had unleashed. The detectives who arrived at the scene were seasoned professionals, but nothing could prepare them for the horrors they encountered that day. Ebony's mutilated body lay in a pool of blood in the bathroom, unrecognizable and haunting. The walls, once pristine, had become a grotesque canvas of violence, echoing the terror of the events that had unfolded within the home. What had once symbolized love and safety was now forever tainted by death and betrayal. Meanwhile, at the police station, Marcus sat alone in an interrogation room. His blood-stained clothes had been removed and replaced with a simple white jumpsuit, but no matter how much he was washed, the horror of that day lingered on his skin. Hours passed as detectives worked to piece together what had driven him to such unimaginable brutality. "Why did you do it, Marcus?" one detective asked, his voice steady yet probing, searching for a crack in the wall of silence Marcus had built around himself. For the first time since his arrest, Marcus looked up. His eyes were hollow and haunted, filled with a mixture of sorrow and disbelief. I didn't know what I was doing," he mumbled, his voice barely audible. "I loved her and she lied to me. She wasn't who she said she was." The detective leaned forward, his tone becoming more insistent. "So you decided to beat her to death and then mutilate her? Do you realize what you've done?" Marcus's gaze dropped once more, and he fell silent, as if the weight of his actions was too much to bear. It was evident that something had snapped within him, a fragile mind pushed to the breaking point by a combination of betrayal, rage, and his own deep-seated insecurities. The brutal crime soon made headlines across the nation, not only due to its shocking violence but also because of the controversy surrounding Ebony's past. The revelation that she had been a transgender woman sent shockwaves through the media, sparking intense debates on gender identity, secrecy, and the limits of trust in relationships. The case became a focal point for discussions about acceptance, love, and the devastating consequences of betrayal, leaving a lasting impact on the community and beyond. As the trial unfolded, Marcus's fate became a matter of national debate. Some called him a monster, driven by deep-seated insecurities to commit an unspeakable act, while others disturbingly framed him as a victim of deception. The legal team defending Marcus aimed to build a case around emotional distress, suggesting that he had been so shocked by the revelation of Ebony's past that he lost control in a moment of madness. They argued that the weight of the secret had pushed him to the brink. However, the prosecution countered with a starkly different narrative. They depicted Marcus as a cold-blooded killer, driven by savage rage rather than emotional shock. As they unveiled the horrific details of the crime scene, photos of the blood-splattered walls, the hammer used in the attack, and Ebony's disfigured body, the courtroom sat in stunned silence. Throughout the trial, Ebony's life was tragically dissected, her private struggles becoming fodder for tabloid headlines. Yet the spotlight remained on Marcus and the horrific actions of that day. Witnesses were brought in to testify, with friends and neighbors describing Marcus and Ebony as a seemingly happy couple. However, a few noted that Marcus had always seemed somewhat controlling. One of the most heart-wrenching moments of the trial came when Ebony's mother took the stand. Grief-stricken, she spoke of her daughter's love for Marcus, recalling how Ebony had always been afraid of revealing her truth, but had hoped Marcus would accept her for who she was. She just wanted to be loved, her mother said, her voice breaking. And instead, she was murdered. After weeks of emotional testimony and closing arguments from both sides, the jury returned with a verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. The decision reverberated not only through their local Houston community but also across the nation, sparking ongoing conversations about the intersection of love, identity, trust, and violence. In Nigeria, a case like this would likely spark similar debates about trust and identity within relationships, especially as society grapples with issues around gender and acceptance. It also serves as a reminder of the complexities that can arise when secrecy is mixed with deep emotional bonds, illustrating the tragic consequences that sometimes follow. As the sentencing was read, Marcus displayed little emotion, his expression a blank mask of resignation. He had transformed from a newlywed husband with a promising future into a convicted murderer, his life now reduced to a mere shadow of its former self. As he was led out of the courtroom, he glanced at the gallery where Ebony's family sat, their eyes filled with grief and sorrow. It was evident that no amount of justice could ever restore what had been lost or undo the irreversible damage. Even after the trial, the case continued to spark debates online, amassing millions of views on platforms like YouTube, where documentaries and trial clips circulated widely. Ebony's friends and supporters mourned her loss, remembering a woman who had sought to live her truth but paid the ultimate price for it. They initiated a viral movement, #JusticeForEbony, advocating for greater protection and rights for transgender individuals and highlighting the alarming rates of violence against the transgender community, particularly among Black trans women. The house where Ebony was murdered was eventually sold, but neighbors reported that it never felt the same again. The horrific events left a lasting scar on the community that would take years to heal. Meanwhile, Marcus's family struggled to comprehend the horrifying crime, with some members expressing disbelief that they never truly knew a man capable of such brutality. This case transcends mere murder. It illustrates how deeply buried secrets can explode in unimaginable ways. Ebony's life was cut short, not due to a lack of bravery, but because society was not ready to accept her for who she was. Marcus's uncontrollable rage serves as a chilling reminder of the dangers that arise when issues of identity, trust, and masculinity collide in tragic circumstances. Sensationalized across social media, this case remains a grim example of how deeply rooted fears and societal pressures can tear lives apart in the most brutal ways. It highlights the urgent need for understanding, acceptance, and change within a society that often struggles to embrace diversity.